Hey guys, it's MJ with MTech, and today we're going to be comparing Android then versus Android now. In 2020, Android is probably one of the most popular, if not the most popular, operating system on mobile devices at the current time. And looking at where Android first started, where they first began, to where they are now, it's kind of crazy. So today I really want to harp on three pieces: design, software, and then camera. If we're able to harp on those three pieces, which I believe are the most crucial pieces to where Android has gone and where smartphone technology and mobile technology has gone, I think we're really going to be able to see the massive difference and milestones that Android has made. The two devices we're going to be comparing today are the HTC G1/Dream if you're in Canada, and the S20 Ultra, which is Samsung's flagship device. Crazy, nuts, 100 times zoom, craziness. Now, talking about the HTC G1, first off, that device was the first publicly released Android phone ever. Android came out in 2008. I know that I flocked when I saw the big advertisement on Rogers' website here in Canada saying, be part of the revolution, all this craziness. The next generation of smartphone technology was here, and it's funny to see the design, which is number one. That's where we're starting here, of the HTC G1. So let's dive in. Looking at the HTC G1, you can clearly see that there are multiple things that used to be important, multiple parts and design features that clearly were so important to people back in the day because of the other manufacturers that were relevant at the time. If you think about why the HTC G1 looks the way it does, has the scroll wheel on the bottom where you can actually scroll through the software with, almost like a navigating tool instead of using your finger. And if you look at the crazy mechanism that flips up the keyboard, you're clearly seeing a generational gap in between, where we were with what we were comfortable with in terms of design on a smartphone, in terms of how we used our smartphones, to now where if you look at the S20 Ultra, it's a slab. It's a pure 6.9-inch crazy screen on your device. The mere 3.2-inch screen on the HTC G1, you could barely watch a YouTube video on that thing. Now, on the S20 Ultra, clearly content has taken its place in our hearts and in our technology, because that's why Samsung's coming out with 6.9-inch screen on their device. The S20 Ultra has crazy design features. When you're talking about the curved screens, when you're talking about the stainless steel housing, the glass back, the hole punch camera on the front where there is no bezel anymore. It's just a slab of a screen. It's a massive phone, a massive screen. When you look at the G1, it is awesome to see how much we needed this keyboard and how much we wanted this keyboard on our phones because of players like BlackBerry, which were deep into the game back then. BlackBerry was such a force where the scroll wheel and the keyboard were essential parts of the smartphone. Of course, when this device came out, when the iPhone first launched and touchscreens really took off, without a stylus, without any of that, and it was just pure navigation through the software with your finger, that's when we saw the difference really start to separate each other from BlackBerry and Samsung and HTC, which is even a crazy name to say right now, just because HTC's really not in the game as much as we, maybe hope for another manufacturer to be there. They're not right now. Looking at the Samsung S20 Ultra, you really see the software change as well. So let's dive into some software. Android does not look the same. If you look at Samsung, if you look at HTC, the G1, the first device that ever launched with software, with Android, clearly there's a big change in terms of how the device works. But what's crazy, what kind of surprises me, is how much of Android is actually still intact even on day one. You could still load widgets. You could still have the app drawer. You could still swipe down and get the notifications that you want. You can still do all of these things. You could still do all these things today. Google really pushed that envelope that they, kind of cracked open back then and said, hey, we have something good here. We have a customizable open source software for these phones that really can work out, and people will like. And people love customizing their devices. People like changing the wallpaper, putting up different widgets, here and there. Now on this phone with only, I think it was 256 megabytes, correct me if I'm wrong, of internal storage, you really couldn't download any apps. You really couldn't do much of anything. I remember having to uninstall an app when I wanted to reinstall another one. I remember, not being able to put a bigger than 16 gig memory card inside the phone. Now again, with software, you have multiple screens that you can customize. You can put apps onto these screens, which I think was the biggest differentiator when Android decided to come out against Apple with their iPhone line. Now with the iPhone line, you had all the apps on your screens. You couldn't adjust them. You couldn't even put them in folders at the beginning. Until a bit later, you can put them into folders and kind of start, organizing them. But Android had this way of organizing the apps in the app drawer first, and then expanding afterwards, and putting whatever, and customizing the screens, putting whatever you want on the screens afterwards. This was revolutionary because of the customization and just how much customization you could have. You could only have one app on the home screen if you really wanted to. You could have no apps on the home screen if you wanted to. Where an iPhone, a lot of people's phones actually looked the same because they had the same icons row by row, and nobody really moved them or changed them. And you couldn't really do that even though people wanted to. You couldn't do that at the beginning. Where again, I do believe Android had almost like a one-up or like an advanced software mindset in terms of where they wanted to take it. And clearly you can see that on the S20 Ultra. Beautiful, you can resize widgets, you can change things. Android has come such a long way. The notification shade now, when you drop down from the top, clearly looks more detailed. There's much more you can do. You can change brightness right away. There's quick toggles where you can turn off Wi-Fi and data and all that good stuff. If you swipe up now, you have the app drawer, and everything is directed by, software buttons instead of the physical buttons which you had on the G1, which you had on a lot of Android devices back then. So clearly software has probably been the biggest change, but you think it would be the biggest change. When you take a look at the cameras on the back, I would say that is probably the biggest change. Let's just take a look at these bad boys on the back. What is going on? Let's see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the back of the S20 Ultra, and we have 1, count them, 1 on the back of the G1. Clearly a massive differentiator. What is important to people these days, and what is important to the smartphone industry these days, is taking pictures, grabbing content, capturing content. It's become such a crucial part of our life to be able to capture moments, save them, upload them to Google Photos, iCloud, whatever it is, and really, have that flexibility, which back in the day, you had a 5 megapixel camera, and you had 1, and no flash. Think about that. 12 years ago, there were no flash on some of these smartphone cameras. Kind of crazy to think about. The video quality, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to get into it, but I think, the biggest change here when you take a look at it is the technology, how well the sensors have, upgraded and evolved, but also how much flexibility we have now. 5 cameras on the S20 Ultra. I know the the newest iPhones, of course, have 3 or 2 on them, with the wide angle, with the ultra wide, with the the telephoto lens, and that's I have the iPhone 11 Pro here with those camera lenses on them, and it's just very cool to see that S20 Ultra, the iPhone 11 Pro, and all these devices coming out all have more than 1 camera to give us that opportunity to take wider pictures, to take close-up pictures, and to be able to do whatever we really want. And I think that that's really shown that we want to capture content on the S20 Ultras, and in 2020 in the smartphone industry, we want to capture content, but we also want to view it on our devices on bigger screens. And that's the coolest thing about looking back in 1998, 2008, and looking now. there's a big change in what we use our smartphones for and what we want to see on our smartphones. And that's the coolest part about, you know, the design, the software, and the cameras in these phones. Everything has changed so much. The whole HTC G1 fits inside the screen. You could probably fit 2 in there. And it's just crazy to see that. You know, another cool fact is there's no front-facing camera on the G1. No front-facing camera. That wasn't important. Now that is so important. So guys, that's been it. I appreciate you guys watching. It's cool to see these things, you know, going back in 2008, seeing what our devices did and how they work to now, and what we actually use them for now, and what's their main purpose now. Very cool to see. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, hit that like button. If you loved it, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Keep doing you. Talk soon, guys.